A good day to all our listeners all over the globe. Welcome once again to Ɔdadeɛ Sports Digest. My name is Kwesi Siedu, also known as Koze, sitting in for our regular host, Johnny Adufeni Zonda. Thank you for tuning in. We are still on our walk down the memory lane of Presec sports and taking some of the great personalities and talking to some of the great personalities that made sports in Presec memorable, and always something to look to back in the day. A very special greeting to our sports heroes. We salute you. This program is to acknowledge our sports heroes of yesteryear, create a buzz about Presec sports, and bring back our sports personalities of yesteryear and the good old memories of the good old days. Reminisce on some of the achievements of these great sports personalities and how they managed to attain such heights. Use it to mentor and encourage those young ones with good talents and encourage them to harness their sporting talents alongside their academic pursuits. Occasionally, bringing in other uniquely talented, accomplished sports personalities to share their motivating experiences. We also use it to develop sports and encourage the development of sports in Presec. Lobby for ideas and funding for the younger sports generations yet to come. If you ever did sports during your time in Presec, you are the reason why we are doing this program. We want to acknowledge you in all ways. You can reach us through the following social media handles. We are streaming links on social media on Facebook at Ɔdadeɛ Radio Ghana, YouTube at Ɔdadeɛ Radio, Twitter at Ɔdadeɛ Radio, Instagram at Ɔdadeɛ Radio. You can also contribute to the program by sending your questions and comments or your favorite sports hero to our WhatsApp number 020-009-2925. I'll repeat it. 020-009-2925. Guys, our guest today attended Rich Church School for his primary education. He was in Presec from 1986 to 91. Left Ghana for the US after lower 6 on an athletic scholarship. He is now a professor in public health at Middle Tennessee State University. He was an Engman House boy, as usual, always the best, comes from Engman House. He actively did long jump and triple jump from 1990 from 5 and 91 lower 6. He was sports prefect during his time. He was the school champion and holds the school record in the long jump, 7.23 meters. He is also the school record holder in the triple jump, 15.48 meters. In 1990 and 1991, he won the long jump and triple jump in the interhouses, interschools, interzonals, and interregionals. He also became the regionals national champion in the long and triple jump, representing Greater Accra in 1990 and 91. He was team captain for Greater Accra at the 1991 regionals in Tamale. National Sports Honors. Swag Athlete of the Year 1998. A Grand Medal recipient in 2006. National records. He was a national record holder in the long jump at 8.12 meters, which stood from 1995 to 2003. National record holder in the triple jump, 17.23 meters, 1998 to present, 26 years and counting. African Athletics Champions record holder, 17.23 meters, which was set in 1998 until present, still standing, 26 years. International honors. He is a four-time African champion in the triple jump, 1998, 1999, 2000, and 2003. A seven-time continental medalist in the long and triple jump. A Commonwealth silver medalist in the triple jump, 1998. He's a three-time Olympian, 1996 to 2000, 2004. A two-time World Championship finalist in the triple jump, 1997 and 2003. 1996, the NCAA Division I U.S. National Champion in long jump indoor. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest for today is no other than Ɔdadeɛ Professor Andrew Owusu, aka Bobby Rush. Andrew, you are warmly welcome to Ɔdadeɛ Sports Digest program. And we thank you for taking time off your busy schedule to join us on this program today.
Well, thank you very much. And I must say that it's a long line of people from whom I think I owe what I was able to do in sports. But this program, the Ɔdadeɛ Sports Digest, in terms of featuring past athletes, I think it's a critical show, because for me, I've learned a lot listening to your previous interview with
Johnny.
And then also I think Zoe's interview. So I learned a lot of things that I didn't know. So thank you once more.
You're welcome. We are glad to have you on the program. Let's start with you and your family, where you grew up, and primary school you attended, and how you developed sports.
Well, I was born in Accra, even though I lived in Ebri at the time. My mother was a teacher at Ebri Girls School, and by the time I was born, she was the assistant headmistress. And so I grew up on the Ebri Girls campus, I'd say the first 5-6 years of my life, before we moved down to Kaneshi. And before I go any further, so I have 3 other siblings. My older sister, Sarah, went to Ebri Girls, no surprise there. My younger brother, Ellis, went to GSTS, and then my younger sister, Louise, went to Wesley Girls. We moved to Kaneshi, stayed there for about 2 years, and then eventually settled in Ringway, Owusu. And so for primary school, I went to Richard School. And then from Richard, obviously transitioned to Presec.
I see. Do you know how many people would pay big money to grow up on a Ebri Girls campus?
I guess I was too young to realize it, but the house that we stayed in was, I think it was right next to Edinburgh. So my mom also served as the house mistress. My sister was reminding me the other day that there was a door between the house and between our house and to get into.
Oh, so you never went strolling down there to have a good look?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were just right across from the headmistress. It was actually opposite, not directly opposite, but adjacent to the headmistress house. And Mrs. Asibe was the headmistress back then.
I mean, she was a strict woman, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, so how did you develop the interest in sports? I mean, now that you are in Presec, is it something that started when you joined, you entered the school, or how was life for you when you entered Presec?
Well, I think my by the way, I started sports and specifically athletics really late. But before I get to that, my first year or so in Prosecco was I think it was fairly rough. Obviously for any Form 1 student, getting adjusted. I remember going back home with maybe a quarter of the things I brought original.
And
My
now,
mom wondering,
now.
my mom wondering what happened to all that stuff. But but also, a lot of my classmates and my seniors who were in house with me would also remember that I had pretty bad asthma.
Oh wow!
Um, yeah, yeah, and I sometimes reminisce with my parents the amount of time I feel like I spent in hospital, being sick. So dust was obviously a big issue for me. Um, but I think around Form 3, we started playing games on the pavement, right? Right in front of the houses. I think, sorry, in front of the dorms. I think dorm A and B, and that's what I see. The pavement had grooves in it, right? And we used to compete. It was like a standing long jump. Right? We didn't know what that was back then. I mean, we had no idea it was related to a standing long jump, and to see who could jump the furthest. I remember we used to do a couple where with 3 contacts to see how far you could go. Another favorite game I used to play, just walking around campus and anywhere, was coming up towards a tree and trying to touch a leaf that was really high up, right? And so I think those were things that, without knowing it, kind of was preparing me for my eventual path. And during long vacation, I think it was Form 4, sorry, Form 3, one of my friends, he went to St. Augustine's. His name was George Khan. And I clearly remember him telling me about an event called triple jump and explaining to me how to execute the triple jump. And so in Form 4, I went out, and I think the school team was training. And I remember this clearly because what Mr. Boybadu said to me back then really stuck with me. And I think the long jumpers were training. I went over there, fooled around a little bit. And Mr. Boybadu said to me that, I think you should try out for the team next year. And so Form 5 was where I started, then the house level. And my progression was extremely quick. I didn't realize it then till much later when I look at the distances in terms of improvement within a few months. So that's in terms of starting. Form 5 was when I officially started with interhouses.
Oh wow, that's quite late. Because I remember I started around from 3. In fact, I was playing hockey from 2, and then volleyball. So yes, I was doing other sports, and then the triple jump. Just like you said, those grooves in front of the dormitories.
Yeah.
That was how I also started. I remember one day we were just strolling around and I saw these guys doing it. I said, oh, I can do better than you. And I leapt further than them. And, I didn't make anything out of it. But later that year, yes, I realized that I had the talent to do this thing. But we're there, I was also in Engman House. And I'm a proud Engman person. And I'm sure you're also a very proud Engman person. Nobody is put in Engman House for anything. We set records, then we
only the best. Only the best.
When you see John Adifeni, tell him. Were there any guys who you looked up to during your time in school, and how they sort of shaped you? I know you started late, but during that time, I'm sure there are guys that you looked up to who really gave you this thing. I know this thing, I'm going to do this thing, and I'll do
it. And this is a more indirect one, because again, my path was so different and so quick. But as a junior, and I think this was maybe Form 2, Form 3, maybe actually no, Form 1, Form 2, maybe. The one person who has stuck in my mind that I always thought, man, I want to be like this guy was Akwesi Wonsu.
Oh, Major.
Yeah. I mean, I think back, knowing what I know now and wondering if, he got some of the opportunities some of us got where he would have ended up. Those Regus was extremely talented. And I can't remember which show it was. Maybe it was the one with Zoe, where a question was asked about people training in the evening and stuff. But he was one of the guys I remember, even as young as I was, that he used to train sometimes in the evening.
Oh, wow.
The road on the backside that used to lead to
The headmasters, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Rebus was the one person that I think I always thought, man, if I ever was an athlete, I wanted to be like this guy.
Okay. Are there any other athletes or sportsmen in your family?
Well, my mom has a bit of a sports history, so she competed at the secondary school level, and then also, from what I understand, did a little bit at the university. So she did a little bit of athletics and then also hockey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that my mom would really be the main one in my family that I would say had a sports background.
Okay. Okay. Did you do any form of sports when you were at Richard?
Not really. Other than, I mean, obviously we all played soccer. We used to also have, I think it was like a sports day thing where we all participated. But at that level, there was nothing that I think I did that would have predicted my eventual path.
Okay.
In fact, one of my friends, and we still keep in touch, though not regularly, was actually Ɔdadeɛ at Great Church. This was a guy who, if you were to ask me who would have ever been the greatest sprinter to come out of Ghana, and he kept it up, given what he did at that age, I would have said actually Ɔdadeɛ. So if he's out there somewhere, to let you know that I really looked up to him like that.
You were in Engman House. What was that house like for you as a sportsman? And what was that house like for you as a sports person doing field events? I mean, did you get some support from the house captain, boys in the house? Because we used to get Udido. By the time you get down there from the dining hall, your Dido is all sorted out, getting some good treatment in the common room.
Yeah. Obviously, again, as I said, because I started fairly late, I was more or less a senior, right, if I put it that way. But I think the support was incredible because there were a lot of my friends in Engman House, including John Saki, for example, who he and I used to race between Clerk House and Engman, that little stretch of yeah. So a lot of the things that I talked about, which I said indirectly, prepared me. There were a lot of, also I should say, a few friends who I think were instrumental, even though we didn't realize what we were doing. So John Saki will be one of them. Obviously, my good friend, and obviously he was in Engman House, but way across on the other side, Ailongi, Frederick Tai would also be another one I would say was instrumental in my development. We also within Engman House had a really good 400-meter runner. His name was, we used to call him Buze Buze. I think David Nati was his name. Was also another one. So he was ahead of me. So he was another one also that I looked up to. But back then, I think there were maybe 3 or 4 of us in the house who featured at the school team level.
I mean, that's typical Engman House for you. Apart from Shi Oje, you'll only have 3, 4 boys. The whole Engman House hockey team were just about 3 of us who played hockey. The rest were just, patapa. But we won our matches, How did you come by the nickname Bobby Rush? There's another question that I have to ask you, though.
That one is a mystery. Because it's a mystery. So perhaps one of the Egma House boys will have to shed light on that. In fact, I told you about how sick I used to be with asthma, and as a junior, people come up with all kinds of names, some not flattering, but they used to call me asthma rats.
In fact, I was about to ask you. Dovi said I should ask you.
Really?
Anyway, he sends his greetings.
Yeah. But yeah, so for the longest, I think that stuck for a while. So the Bobby Rush one, I'm still looking for the roots of that. It's a mystery that needs to be solved. Yes.
We shall investigate and go into it.
Yeah, so please, that's my one request to the listeners out there.
Do you remember when you were first called into the school team and how the other sprinters were selected to join the school team? How did you feel then? And when you became a school athlete, I mean, finally being called to participate for the school.
Yeah, I think so. So as I said earlier, Mr. Bobadu in Form 4 told me, hey, I think you should try out the next year. And so obviously it starts at the house level with inter houses. And I remember stepping forward and saying, hey, I wanted to try this. The long jump and the triple jump, but I have a small story a side story tangent there. So before the houses, you got to figure out who's going to run what, and so we go out there. We kind of have this trials, kind of long jump, no problem. And they actually wanted to run the 4x400, and I stupidly and I had never experienced lactic acid in my life before. So, they start us, you go, and the last 100 meters, you realize, man, there's something wrong with my legs. When you finish that type of race, also, there's a delayed reaction. It takes a while for you to really feel the burn. Huh? I almost quit athletics that day. But anyway, so from that, ended up representing the house and winning the long jump and triple jump. And in fact, I was going over some of my certificates, which I found recently, and realized that in that year, which was 1990, I won the long jump and triple jump, but I also participated in the 100 and 200, and then the 4x4. So that was my first start. Obviously, winning the long jump and triple jump meant that I got the opportunity to represent the school. I think my fellow mates in Engman House were very proud and extremely supportive. When I think back to those days, it was nothing but love from the guys. And the entire school, including athletes from other houses, were also very encouraging and supportive. So that was my first initiation into the team.
Dovi said he gave you your first spikes. Is it true?
Dovi said he gave me my first spikes.
Yeah.
Possibly, and I'll say possibly because spikes were
very rare in those days.
Very rare in those days.
And even the jumping spikes.
Yeah, and I can't remember if I got that from Dovi, but I do remember the type of shoes it was. It was an Adidas Sprint Spikes. It was an Adidas Spring Spikes. And anyway, so Dovi and I, we go back a long time. If he says it, it's probably true because he has a lot better memory than I have. But yeah, Spikes was a whole different beast. It felt so weird.
Yeah, very light.
Anything that I was, yeah. But what I also remember though is the spikes that I had earlier were also a bit on the tight side. So you kind of had to have my toes a little bit curled in the shoe.
Uncomfortable.
They made a very big difference. That you quickly realize the advantage of competing in spikes.
Yeah. Do you remember what your training regime used to be like? Well, after inter-houses, obviously, when you are selected to become a school athlete, there are some regimes that you go through. During my time, my sports master was BT. Boy Badu came after I had left. So I don't know what sort of regime that Boy Badu took you guys through, but BT will come and wake you up about 5:30, do jogging. In the mornings we have our schedule that we do. In the afternoons we have our schedules that we do, and you wouldn't think that BT was a smoker because he will burn you when you follow him around, for 400 meters. What was the training schedule like, in your time?
Yeah, I think similar to you, there were some early morning training also. In fact, there were some of the early morning trainings I clearly remember were not formal, but other athletes that would go. Back then, we used to say, how do we say, going route, right? Yeko route. So I would follow Buze Buze. Even at Elong, yeah, I remember a couple of times we would jog all the way from Pesek to Legon, and then the hill.
The Commonwealth Hill.
Oh yeah, we would run that, and then we kind of figure out our way back to campus in enough time to make it. But the first year, in 1990, though, I was so green. So it was whatever Mr. Babadu asked us to do. So our warm up, our stretching. Um, I think we did very few drills. When I talk about drills to work on, mechanics. Um, and then whatever the workout was that day, for the jumpers, we mostly, obviously, a little bit of running, but then jumping. I also do remember that pit. It was really hard.
Tell me about it.
For our mates who did not appreciate that was sometimes if you landed in the wrong spot, I, I clearly remember a bruised tailbone. Right? So that was the basics, but I think after I won, so my first interco, after I won the long jump and triple jump, I think at that point, Sababadu realized that there was definitely something there. And so at some point, he also introduced me to Coach Mills. I don't know if you remember the late Coach Mills at Crossport Stadium. Also, Pauli, I don't know if you remember.
I know Pauli. Pauli was training the 400-meter guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Pauli. Yeah.
So Coach Mills was my first. Sorry, I said Coach Williams. Coach Mills. Coach Mills. I meant to say Coach Mills. So Coach Mills was one I also got introduced to. So in between some of the things I was doing at Presec, especially in lower, I would also go to stadium to train with them sometimes.
Okay. Now, I know the what it entails to be a triple jumper and a long jumper. My specialty was more in triple jump. But how did you train for these specific events? Were there any specific things that you did for long jump? Of course, I know that long jump is about speed and hitting the board properly. Triple jump is about technique, So did you spend more time in triple jump, or did you do more of
the first year? So in 1990, I would say, and then as I said before, I was a bit green. So whatever I was told to do was what I did. So we spent quite a bit of time running, mostly short runs. So closer to what the short sprinters will be doing, like say the 100-meter runners.
long wind sprints.
But then focusing on the jumping, of the level of expertise. So he did the best that that he could. But what happened, and you and I have a shared Francis, was that in lower six, so prior to the season starting, I think this would have been in December, or I can't remember the exact month, but prior to the season starting in 91, I was training at the Accra Sports Stadium when I was approached by who I got to know to be Francis Dodu, who at that time was our national record holder in the triple jump at 17-12. And he asked me a few questions. In fact, one of the stories he tells, which I again, his memory is better than mine, but he did ask me, he said he asked me if I was interested in a scholarship in the US, and I said yes. But I remember the story a little bit different, and I had to remind him that after our initial conversation, he asked me to join him in a workout the next day. And I think what I didn't realize back then was he was trying to get a feel for my potential. But what I remember from that workout was I literally crawled from the stadium. I mean, because you can relate, I mean, you've been doing just the regular stuff at school, and then all of a sudden, here is somebody who, by all standards, was a world-class athlete. Is asking you to join you. He's running these repeats. And then there was a little gym under the stadium. We went over there. He was doing squats. I had never lifted. I don't even, after he left, I managed to kind of hold my own. And I told him that after he left, I spent about almost another hour laying on the floor. Somewhere in the corner until I could manage to walk home. But part of that also was me picking up some of the things he talked about. And so after that, I adjusted my training a little bit. So for example, I discovered that there was something called bounding, which was very important for triple jump. Obviously, learning to bound takes time, but at least I understood that was important. And so during vacation, for example, I would jog all the way from our home to Richard School, their football field. And that's where I used to work out and, do some bounding for the runs on the endurance side since it was off season. So maybe some 200s, 300s. There's actually, I don't know if the road is still the same, but there used to be a U, what I called a U-shaped road that the lower part of the U went directly in front of Richard. Right. And so I will start on one end, come down, run past the front of Richard, up the other side. But that was when I was, so lower six was when I was starting to understand the importance of technique. And that, for example, the long jump, you're projecting slightly high, you're projecting higher than, say, in the triple jump, because in the triple jump, you want to keep your faces relatively low. And prior to that, what I used to do was, hop in the triple jump like a long jump, right? So you have this huge first phase. And as a triple jump, I'm sure when you come down. But yeah, so the lower six was when I really started to get a better understanding of what type of training was needed and the importance of different things. And let me back up. The importance of how the various components, when put together, actually made me a better jumper.
Fantastic. But during these, I'm sure we had competitions with Achimota School, our small boys, and other schools was, Kraka and things. Were there any guys there who actually gave you some stiff competition, those days?
There was a guy at Achimota. I think his name was Ben. I want to say Sebefia was one. And then I don't know if it was Ken Obin in the long jump was also another one. Lawrence Asiedu was ahead of me. So I met in other other competitions. But I also have another side story. The first time I went to for Intercore at the stadium, because all we have is the field in Presec, grass. It's not even grass because you've run down that particular section so much that all you have is the sand, right? If you are not lucky, it's loose sand. The triple jump board is relatively close to the pit. So the first time I went to the stadium, which was the first time I'd seen a tartan track in my life, and I asked where was the triple jump board, and they pointed way back there.
When you finish, I'll tell you a story.
Because I stood over there, and I had only jumped, I think it was 13:10 to win in the houses. 13:10. So you look at this board from the side, and it's like, oh Lord, I'm not going to. I'm about to let the whole school down. Come and see panic. But I don't know why I did this. I asked for a tape measure and measured from the board to the edge of the pit. And that was when I realized it was just a little over 12 meters. So I knew that I could make the pit, regardless of what it looked like from the side. But yeah, that was a moment of panic that has stuck with me for a long time. Yeah. Go ahead and share yours.
When I was in Form 5, triple jump, representing the school for the first time, we got to the stadium, they called the jumpers, and then we got to where the triple jump pit is. And there was this guy who was representing Aquinas. He's from Infantspoon. When I knew him, he was in Infantspoon. So he said, no, we can't use the 13 meters, the 12 meters board, but we should go and use the 13-meter board. And I said, what's wrong with you? I mean, this is what, students are supposed to be using. Why should we go and use what, national and international athletes? He said, no. And then the officials too fair for it. They said, okay, let's go and use that board. Fair enough. We said, okay, we'll do it. Funny for him, his first jump, he didn't make it to the sand. He didn't make it to the sand. Hop, step, jump, he was on the tartan. And I was sitting there just relaxed watching him, and I said, you see, we should have gone for this thing. And that was where my first jump, and that was when I set the record, 14:50. So I see where you're also coming from. When you see that distance, that challenge, it's very difficult. But anyway, going on. Did you, among the guys that, you've already said that there were some guys that you looked up to and somehow shaped your this thing towards in sports, your life in sports. I don't know if I can ask if there were some that you admired. They were not really athletes, but maybe they were in other sports, or hockey, volleyball, football, and the way they moved on campus. They held themselves. Was it something that also somehow shaped this thing when you decided that you were going to do this thing? The discipline.
I think it is. I don't have a specific name. But what I remember is that we had a fairly large group of people who we moved together and were extremely supportive. And as I said, not just within the house itself, Engman House itself, but obviously across campus. Now, I kind of get where you're going with the question, but I also, when I reflect on my time at Presec, especially when it comes to the sports side, is that ascent was so quick, because prior to that, I really didn't have a big interest in sports per se, other than obviously we all like playing pickup soccer. Another way to think about how quick I moved through was, so let's say from January to Basically almost like within 15 months, I had blossomed and I'd left the system.
Wow.
Right. That's how quick it was. Entering Form 5 and obviously in the houses, I think it was in December, if I remember right. So let's say then intercourse starting in January, right? Season then goes through May. By the next May, or sorry, by May the next year, I was already on my way out.
Oh,
Um,
okay. So
so yeah, it's a very unique situation. But what I clearly remember is during that short time, was having a lot of support. And again, I say people like Felix Ayi, because I remember a lot of the training I ended up doing was also with Felix. So lots and lots of good memories with him.
do you remember any of your arch rivals in Interquad? That means you must have done one or two inter schools, even inter regionals, inter zonals. There was this boy from the Volta region who used to give me tough time. Some guy, I can't remember his name. You know, he and some guy from Ashanti region, Abetepe, some Prempeh College boy. But
Those Prempeh boys, and actually, I have a few. So one was from the Volta region, Alex. I think his last name was good, light skinned guy. And again, the first time I went to regionals, um, he I remember going. So the team we were based in Achimota, and we went out to train at Accra Sports Stadium. And I'm doing my warm up, stretching, and you see this guy, fairly big guy. I remember he had really big, really muscular thighs, and he was doing all these drills. I mean, it looked really impressive. So Alex was another one. I mean, fortunately, I ended up winning both the long jump and triple jump. And in fact, that was probably one of the most difficult competitions for me at that level because I got malaria just before.
oh dear.
Yeah, yeah. Um, then I think I caught it about a week before I competed. So that was a really tough one. And then on the guys from Kumasi, I remember guys like Boniface Amuzu. And interestingly, Amuzu and I are in the same institution. We work in the same institution right now.
Do you constantly remind him that
I,
you have a small boy?
I, I, I remind him, and he almost won my last regionals in Tamale at Kaladan Park.
Wow.
Well, it was very hot, very dusty. You can imagine that field, just nothing but sand. And one of the things that happened during the triple jump, which it took me about, I think it was almost 4 or 5 jumps to realize what was happening, because you feel like you're in pretty good shape. You feel the effort you're putting in, and based on the outcome, it's like, man, this is a little bit short. Here's what I realized was that everybody is running down on the runway the exact same path. And after, guys have, let's say if there were 12 or 15 of us, after about 3 rounds, we're talking 45 runs, the soil has become really soft.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I moved my run up slightly off to the side and came at it at an angle, just so that I could get firmer ground and ended up winning the I tell Bonnie that the Ɔdadeɛ smart.
You can only get that from Engman house, Engman training.
Yeah, but those would be some of the guys I competed against, and then I had some competitions against others who at the national level. So Lawrence Asiedu would be one of them. George Darko was also another one. I did mention Kent Obin. And these were all guys that I think really pushed me.
Yeah, fantastic. As an athlete, how do you handle defeat or bounce back from a defeat or a loss? I mean, as a triple jumper, it's an individual sport. So if you are beaten, how do you feel and how do you put yourself together and coming for the next event? I mean, next attempt.
One of the things I learned very quickly, and this was, so I left Presec at the end of lower six, left for the University of Alabama on athletic scholarship. And my first season in Alabama, because remember, Presec, I did so well and I literally won everything, right? So you can think of me that young, thinking of myself as a, the big fish in the, I thought was a big pond. And then going over to Alabama. And Alabama is in the SEC, which is one of the toughest conference in the US at the NCAA level. And very quickly, my first two competitions, I'm jumping close to my personal best, and I am nowhere near these other guys, right? And so you're giving everything you have, but you are losing. And I was depressed maybe for a few weeks until I decided, and I don't know what triggered this, was to change my mindset, which is I needed to focus on my development, right? And second, to think of every competition, every jump as an opportunity to learn something and move forward from there. And so one of the things I also started doing, in addition to the coaching I was getting, I had some pretty good coaches, but I would also look at other athletes who were better than me to figure out what was it that they were doing that maybe I wasn't doing, right? And what are some of the things that we, I would say were similar, which meant, okay, that's an asset for you, but here are some other things. And very quickly, it changed the trajectory of my performance. And so going back to this question of defeat, I very early in my career learned to think about competing with myself. In the idea being that I was always trying to be a little bit better than I was the last time, right? Because sometimes if you focus too much on the person in front of you, you lose track of the fundamental and basic things you need to be doing, right? And as a triple jumper, I'm sure people think of it as you are running and you are jumping, right? Like in the long jump, except the triple jump, obviously you have three phases. But then you quickly also realize that no, how you start off your run, what you do during your acceleration, right? Your transition in the middle of the run, your turnover coming to the board, all those things together, if you do them well, translate into longer jumps. And in fact, maybe later on, I'll talk a little bit about how that to me helped me set the national record at a time when I actually had an injury.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just talk about some of your best performances. I mean, you hold a school record in both triple and long jump. I mean, how did you feel when you realized that you had broken the school record and set a new record in both triple and long jump? And did you know whose record you had broken?
I had no clue, and I think that's one thing that Persec we need to do better in terms of keeping records. Yeah, because you come in, you hear from the seniors talking about when they were juniors, all these great athletes that were before them and their performances, but very seldom would you find or do you hear about what those performances were. So for me, I think it was Mr. Boybadu who told me that was the school record. And I think it was a great source of pride because I talk about the fact that earlier as a junior, I had some health issues, right? And it was a bit of a challenge. But then being able to perform in a way that I didn't really expect, and also in a way that I felt made not just my house proud, but also my institution proud, I think meant a lot. So those performances, those records were great to have, but more importantly, it was the what those records meant for my peers and then also for my institution at the national level.
Very well. Listeners, we've been talking to Professor Andrew Owusu, Bobby Rush, as he's known, a former athlete of Presec. And so far, we've delved into his time here in the school and the competitions he participated in, the performances he had at various levels. So far, it's been an interesting conversation. We'll go for a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about some of his international events and other things that he would like to also share with us. We'll be back.
Hallelujah.
Ɔdadeɛ Radio. Like us on Facebook at Ɔdadeɛ Radio. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Ɔdadeɛ Radio. You can WhatsApp or call us on 0200 092925.
Welcome back to Owusu Sports Digest. And my guest this evening is Professor Owusu, Bobby Rush. Let me just say a shout out to a few guys: Paul Bogle, Francis Baini Dovi, Papse, Hoffman Latte. Unfortunately, he went to Achimota School. Went to school at the other side of Legon, Alumble. Dikti Engman House, Abinchi Engman House, Sly Stone of the Stone family of Engman House. Bobby, I wanted to ask you, there's a few questions that have come in. They want to know which you preferred, whether triple jump or long jump.
I think for me, earlier in my career, long jump was my preference, right? And so at the University of Alabama, that's one of the things. So I focused quite a bit on that. However, I was also doing quite well in the triple jump also. And so my first year at the University of Alabama, I ended up performing better in the triple jump at the end of the season than in the long jump. But I sustained an injury. I think it was my second year at the University of Alabama. That forced me to focus more on the long jump for, I would say, at least 2 years. So my second and third year at the University of Alabama. And it was really towards the end of my time at Alabama that I transitioned fully into a triple jump.
Oh, wow. Okay. Folks, welcome to the second part of the program, which mainly looks at how sports impacted on his life and how he sees the development of sports generally in the country. Bobby, as an athlete, got enough support from the school, teachers, the prefects of the time? Looking back, did you think you were trained or coached well by your PE master? Already you said that you started very late and your transition was very quick. And from what you've said, yes, you got support from stadium coaches and other things. But in school, how did things... I know you said Boy Badu did some good stuff for you. But, I'm sure personally you did a lot yourself.
Yeah, man, I think the support level could have been better. But I also think Mr. Babadu did the most with the level of support that he had available to him. But as most athletes will tell you, it also takes a village. It's not just even what we got out of the support we got in the SEC, which again, I can talk extensively about that a little bit in terms of some of the things that I think can make a difference. But also, you talked about what I got from folks training at the stadium, for example, right? And bringing some of that back to Persec. I think most teachers at Persec probably did not think highly of the sports, of athletes. Meaning, yes, it was something that you engaged in, but I'm sure some would have preferred if we spent our time focusing on our studies. And so on that end, I don't think that the support was where it needed to be. And it doesn't actually have to be that way, right? Meaning if we make a conscious effort in terms of how we program things, it's possible to support athletes, not just academically, but also on the development side. So maybe a long answer to your question. The support was there, but not at the level at which it needed to be. Expertise, some level of expertise was there from Mr. Boy, but not necessarily where, knowing what I know now, I think it needs to be.
Okay. Did you see sports then as a career option? I mean, you've just said that, most of the masters would rather have seen you in the classroom studying or something than to be hopping around on the school field But then, did you see any future as a sportsman growing as a student when you started doing this thing?
No, I didn't get into sports with the idea that I wanted to be I wanted to take it beyond, say, Persec, right? I think it was more of, this is something I am good at, and this is something that I enjoy. However, when I met Francis Gould and he explained to me what some of the opportunities potentially were out there for me in terms of being able to get a scholarship to continue my tertiary education, it quickly dawned on me that this jumping around like a grasshopper out there, maybe there were some benefits to it beyond certificates and the recognition that comes with it. And so I obviously ended up getting a scholarship at the University of Alabama, but then it quickly dawned on me that if you can combine sports and academics successfully, in fact, the opportunities out there for you as a student athlete actually exceed what I think is out there for those who focus solely on academics.
Now, you've been out there, Olympic Games, All African Games, intercollegiate, you've done it all. Now, competing at those levels, how did you feel, and what are some of the experiences that you gained that you think that pushed you to the sort of heights that you attained?
Well, let's start with at the University of Alabama and being in the SEC. The US NCAA Division One system is literally the best quote unquote farming system in the world when it comes to athletics. So when we are talking about development to the elite level, right? And so for me, being in that environment, one not only helped me better understand how to balance the sports and the academics in terms of preparing for a future sports, but also getting the necessary level of development and coaching and support to allow me to get to the point where I could represent Ghana at the international level. And so the US NCAA system for me was a good proving ground, such that when I transitioned to the next level, I remember my first Olympics. This was '96 in Atlanta. You get there and you realize, okay, I'm competing against some of these guys whom I have already been competing against for quite a bit. Now, having said that, I still think I didn't do as well my first Olympics because I was extremely nervous. Just before you enter the stadium, I looked to my left and guess who is standing there? Carl Lewis. Was it? I mean, you psyched yourself up. This is your big chance, and I've got this. And then just before you enter the stadium, you look to your left, and here's the legend, right? Um, but it is important, right? And the reason why I say that experience is important because until you walk into an Olympic stadium where you have 60 plus people, right, in the stadium, I think we often underestimate how psychologically that can impact performance. But again, by virtue of competing at that level and getting that experience, you then realize, hey, here are some valuable lessons I can take there. Carl Lewis is already worried about Mike Powell, who is also worried about somebody else. I need to focus on myself, right? And so that's the kind of attitude I adopted, and I think it served me well over the years.
Very well. What would you say was the impact of sports in your life during school? I keep on coming back to this, and how have you used that to enhance your journey in life? Doing sports, did sports condition you in any way in your approach to learning or your career in life?
Yes, and for me, physical activity helps clear my mind, right? And in fact, I mean, right now, I feel like I'm a little too old now, but for the longest, even after I retired, when I was done teaching lectures and other administrative stuff I used to do, every afternoon I would literally go to the track, our school track team, and actually help coach the jumpers and continue to engage in physical activity. Because for me, it helped clear my mind. In fact, sometimes I used to joke that for me, physical activity is kind of like therapy. Second, the issue of also time management. To be successful at this level and then also to be able to combine that with schooling means that you are learning how to manage your time. And then the other thing, which I shared this with a lot of younger athletes, is literally my legs paid for my education all the way from my bachelor's, my master's through my PhD.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And when you combine the value of those scholarships, you quickly realize, oh, wow, that for me, sports made a really big difference. And this is opportunities that I think exist for a lot of athletes, including athletes coming up today. And that's another thing I would like to touch on that I think PRESEC is missing out on. And these are life-changing opportunities.
This time, the sort of school system has changed. You don't have the 7 years anymore. You only have 3 years in the school, and everybody is trying to pass the exam to go to university and further his education. how do we try to get sports into this? Because, from what you're saying, if we try to develop athletes, that could also be a path for them. Get some good sports scholarships and, train outside, study outside, and develop. Like you see countries like Botswana, coming up in like the recent games. The guy won the 200 meters.
Yeah, to go.
Yeah, and they were there 4x100, 4x400. They were there. What do you think we can do, or what do you think we should do? I mean, is it just got to be learn, study? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? Because our athletics is going down.
Absolutely not. And I have sometimes I get into these conversations with friends who would ask, so would you let your son, for example, do sports? And I'll come back to your question, but I'm using my own child as an example. And I say absolutely. Part of where we are falling short, right, is the lack of understanding as to what is important for development through, say, the elementary school, into junior high, into senior high, right? What set of skills, fundamental movement skills, if we get event specific, what are some of the basic sprinting skills or throwing skills or jumping skills that we should be teaching them at the various level, such that when they specialize, they are more likely to be successful. Now, you've clearly identified the issue of how much time they have relative to, say, us, right? 7 years versus, I know it says 6, but it's really what, 5 maybe?
Yeah.
Right? And that's a conversation we need to have at the national level. Right? It's a conversation we need to have at the national level. And some of us have been pushing to get GES to engage with, say, not just Ghana Athletics, but the various national federations, to figure out also a way how we can sync how we can sync the school sports calendar with the national federations, such that there's also a natural transition through that. Having said that, the problem is the problem. We still have only maybe 4 years, I think, to develop these athletes. The biggest thing that I think would make a difference is, one, identifying them early at the secondary school level. And then 2, helping them develop some of the basic skills that once they learn it, assuming they are just practicing every now and then, nothing excessive, right, should serve them well, because one, they are still growing, so they're going to get stronger, they're going to get faster, and it better positions them for success towards the end of their academic career in PRESEC. The one thing we cannot do, and this is what I think as a country we keep doing and hoping for different results, is where we are not investing early or helping them early, and then somehow when they get to, say, SHS 2 or 3, we are expecting them to basically produce performances that will make them competitive for some of these opportunities. And so I think it's a long-term strategy, and it's one that requires us to start early. I have some ideas that I think going forward I'll be discussing with Mr. Butche, who is the current PE Master at PRESEC. Because when I think about it, the academic barrier to get into an NCAA school on athletic scholarship, for a student coming out of PRESEC, it is extremely low. Because I'm not kidding. Literally, there are scholarships available that students could be taking advantage of. It's just that we need the performance to be dialed up just a little bit, right? And it's not that I'm saying this is a path for everybody, but at least one path for the development and giving some of these kids opportunities that I think are basically life-changing opportunities. look at what happened to Azamati, right?
Yeah.
Where Azamati is today. I was fortunate enough to be with him in Paris, and 4x1 didn't go as well as we hoped. But again, these are life-changing opportunities.
Very well. Folks, if you want to reach us, you can WhatsApp us on 0200092925. I'll repeat it. 0200092925. YouTube at Ɔdadeɛ Radio. Facebook at Ɔdadeɛ Radio Ghana. X, formerly Twitter, at Ɔdadeɛ Radio. Instagram at Ɔdadeɛ Radio. Folks, we are talking to our own Professor Andrew Owusu. I don't see a lot of former athletes, taking up, even if it's part-time or this thing, training sessions with some of our athletes or sports in general. Is it because coming from there, you are not given the opportunity to hobnob with the coaches who are here, or they feel a bit intimidated that you are coming from outside and you're going to take their jobs, or there's no collaboration, which makes them feel that, okay, these are my boys and I want to keep my boys. This man to say, these are my boys and I keep my boys, nobody should go there, that sort of thing. There was a bit of that during our time. But, I don't see most of the guys coming in and say, listen, let's collaborate and see how we can improve sports in this country.
So, and that's a very good question. In athletics, I have to say that we are probably apart from other sports, in the sense that we have several former athletes who are currently part of the system and are contributing in very important ways, right? But that's also a conscious choice, and it was a mentoring choice. And the reason why I say it was a mentoring choice is, for me, folks like Francis Dodu were the ones who basically impressed upon me the importance of continuing to stay engaged with my sport even after retirement, right? It's the reason why I, in addition to my teaching duties, also picked up coaching. And I've been fortunate enough to have been a national team coach on quite a number of international assignments. We've had others, such as, I don't know if you remember Leo Miles Mills.
Yeah.
Leo's also served as a national team coach. Is also very engaged. Eric Nkansa is also another one. Christian Isian. And by the way, the three names that I just mentioned, don't forget, these were the guys who got to the Olympic final in the 4x1 in 1996, right? So on that end, we've been trying to do that. Now, the other issue which you've talked about, and you mentioned as part of your question, has to do with also the collaboration at the local level. And so being able to collaborate with the coaches at the local level and thinking of them more so as peers, where there's also opportunity to learn from each other. And a lot of our local coaches were also former athletes. And I think, going back to your question, the reason why it is so important for past athletes to stay engaged, whether in coaching, whether in administration, whether in helping to secure funds to support the sport, is that they also have a level of understanding about the sport that the average person who did not go through that path will not necessarily appreciate or understand. So on the athletic side, I think we are doing fairly well. Ghana Athletics is doing fairly well. The problem, as I see it, has to do with funding. And that is really the bane of sports in Ghana. Everything is football. And don't get me wrong, I love football. I mean, even after I retired, I was playing in our adults league over here, right? But reality is we can't support football to the detriment of every other sport. Right? We can't do that. And I think sometimes we forget. So, for example, the 4x1 in Paris, obviously, we had issues with the handoff in the semi-final. And you get criticized for that. That comes with the territory. But what Ghanaians often forget is that there were only 16 countries that managed to qualify to get to Paris. Right? And then we also forget the level of investment some of these other countries are putting in. And I'm not saying it has to be at the same level, but you can quickly see that, yes, we need to invest a little bit more for us to get more out of it.
That's true. That's true because, some of these guys had their own little issues in terms of remuneration and funding for their trips and, accommodation and all that. And, some of these things, you need to have your personal coach or your coach by you whenever you are not, they encourage you, So there's a little bit more to be done to get these things to par.
Yeah, and then also, just real quick. So sometimes, you hear these comparisons between, say, Ghana and Jamaica, Ghana and you even raise the issue of Botswana, right? And what we forget is that for some of those countries also, athletics is kind of like a national sport, right? So relatively speaking, they're also putting a lot of resources in, and also on the coaching front or there's quite a bit of serious investment in the human capital side of things too, right? So it's not just also say having facilities, but also having facilities also in a place that makes sense. Think about Accra Sports Stadium. We took out the tartan tracks, right? And the vast majority of athletes were coming from the area right around there, right? And then we said, oh, LWAC is close by. Now go and look at LWAC. LWAC is literally like patches of tartan and concrete, right? We have only one facility. Well, people will say two, but technically I call it one facility in Accra right now, which is the Legon Stadium, obviously for the Africa Games. Yes, they built another track at Boteman, but look at where Boteman is.
Yeah, that's far. Yeah. That's far.
And so when we are planning some of these things, we need to have people at the table who also understand some of these things, as opposed to just what is financially, in some cases, and this may be controversial to say, but sometimes we are looking to cut corners, right? Trying to do it on the cheap, even if it ends up costing us long term.
Yeah. One of the things, I don't know if during your time you had things like the National Day Games, National Sports Festival, which, was on regional basis, where you had athletes from all the regions competing, which was also part of a pool from which you could select sportsmen from, because it wasn't just athletics, it was volleyball, it was hockey, it was football, and all that, basketball, and all that. But these days, I've been back since '91. I don't see anything. I don't see anything, yeah. And I don't see how things are developing.
Yeah, the funding is really created for those type of competitions, right? I mean, these were competitions that were funded by the government, and now, say for example, if you take Ghana Athletic Association, you will have to go find money to host that type of competition. The problem with hosting that type of competition for a national federation, given the low resource environment that we are currently in, is that your athletes also need about 6 to 8 competitions for you to call it kind of like a season, right? And so that one competition might take a lot of your resources, and now you are competing trying to figure out, well, how do I do I have one competition like that, or 1 or 2 big competitions, versus being able to give them the whole season. And again, this is where I would say that government needs to really rethink. And it's not that we are not putting money into sports or other things, sports related things. In fact, there's quite a bit around. It's just that in my opinion, it's either wasted or spent on stuff that is unnecessary. For example, Oforidia, right? We just put in a brand new track there. The track is actually, and I don't know, it hasn't been handed over. So you have athletes in Koforidia or some of them in clubs there who can't even train, even though we have a track sitting right there. Yet we will hold rallies or political events there, drive cars over the Tatang.
Oh dear.
Wow, what is wrong with us? Right? Think about the amount of money we just spent, and we will drive cars on it. Even at Legon, I remember right after the Africa Games, when was it the Wafu that was played at Legon? Right after the Africa.
Yeah.
And they had these very heavy benches with sharp edges sitting on a track that we had just literally spent God knows how much on. Right. So these little things make a difference.
How did you see the All Africa Games, which ended recently, and did you watch any of the field events?
Yes, I followed it very closely. In fact, what I haven't said is I work extremely close with Ghana Athletics Association. I'm actually a Ghana Athletics coordinator for our foreign-based athletes. So I was heavily involved in that, even though I wasn't physically on the ground during the games.
I was sitting close to where the triple jump and long jump pits were. But I don't remember seeing any local guy participating, in the triple jump. I remember seeing the world champion, the guy from Burkina Faso?
Yeah, Sango.
Yes, I saw him, and then I saw some other guys. But, currently we don't have triple jumper, long jumper.
At the national level, in terms of we go through cycles. Let me put it that way, right? So most recently, we've had Deborah Aqua in the women's long jump, won a bronze medal at Commonwealth Games, multiple times medals at the African level. Abigail Kwatin, also now Rose Yaboa. But on the triple jump side, I think we've gone quite a few years, especially on the men's side. And that's something that bothers me quite a bit. Because Ghana has a very strong tradition when it comes to the long jump and the triple jump, at least at the continental level. I don't know if you realize this, but 2 of the continental games records, so the Africa Games record and the African Championships record, are held by Ghanaians. Right, Francis Dodu has the Africa Games record, 1712, still stands. And then I also have the African Championships record that still stands. So that's one area that we need to, I think, help not only identify the next generation of jumpers, but also support them.
Would you assist? How would you assist in? I wouldn't say just only Presec, but if you take the area, Legon, you have Presec, there's schools around. There's WAS at Adenta, Achimota School. Shaping some of the guys and getting them to participate. Let's see. Seeing how we can develop some of these guys into sportsmen. Just how would you be able to, assist in this, or what do you think that we need to do to get some of these things done?
I think we need to basically train a crop of coaches or enthusiasts who are interested at helping at the youth level. Because learning those fundamentals early is important. Now, there's a new model emerging in Ghana. Well, I say new, but it's new in terms of the size and number of athletes and the quality of athletes coming out of it, which is several clubs are now being developed around the country. Right. And so that's also one way. And when I say clubs, just going back to your question, what do I think would help? So in the US system, and my son is actually in the AAU system right now, but you have all these clubs, right, where they may be meeting twice a week, some maybe 3 times a week to train and learning some of the important um, mechanics, drills, and basically, I should just say basic training, um, engaging in training that would be useful to them as they move through. So that's one model we could try. Now, at the secondary school level, at Presec, and I think on one of the conversations had on this program previously, the question was asked, I think the question was directed to Mr. Butri about whether Presec recruits athletes. And he talked about the pressures on admissions, given all the various stakeholders who are also trying to get into Presec. I really think we need to put some thought into that, especially if you can find athletes who academically are also doing well, that we also think about recruiting, right? Because to be honest with you, you need to start with a talent base, and sometimes getting started is the hardest part, right? Because once you get that going, you also develop what I call a culture that makes it easier to sustain development going forward. Also, our facilities, and I don't know if you've seen the sports field of Presec. At least the last time I saw it.
The last time I was there was when we had the bonfire night. And I don't remember seeing anything like tracks around that place.
Yeah, yeah. And think about us as an institution, right? With all the people we have, with all the resources, and when I say resources, meaning possibly pooled resources, surely we should be able to have something better than what we have.
I think that, when you enter the school to the left side, we should be able to put up a stadium or even, indoor volleyball, basketball, something that even the national team can hire to play there or something, or even, and it can be for the community around, the primary schools, to also use for their sports. I think
and Jose, what you are describing, even in addition to maybe the community possibly or other institutions also being able to use it, is maybe even building what I'll call a high performance center, right? And when I say the youth level or the junior level, but housing it at Presec, right? We have the people, but in our case, for me right now, say facilities is more of an issue, right? Whereas in other places, I would say it's not facilities; it's actually the know-how or the expertise or the ability to basically capitalize on those facilities. On our end, I think it's the lack of facilities, appropriate facilities that's really hampering sports development in Presec. And then also getting students or student athletes to also realize, you can successfully combine both academics and sports and actually do very well. And again, open doors that might not otherwise be open to them.
You talked about some of your Olympic Games participations, and one of them, the Atlanta one, looking to your right and seeing Carl Lewis standing there. Did it dawn on you at that time as well that probably you might have been the only Presecan who participated in the Olympics?
No, actually, I was so nervous. I won't lie, but I was so nervous. I think I didn't even have the presence of mind to even reflect on historically what did my participation meant. But over the years, you kind of reflect on that, and I think I managed to get really far from those humble beginnings in Engman House, all the way through to the national level, the continental level, the Commonwealth level, World Championships. And my highest ever ranking in the world was seventh.
Oh, in the
Um,
world.
yeah, in the world, yeah, yeah. And that's a really, really, really long way. When I think of that skinny kid coming in Form One, no idea what life was going to be. So I will say that if, when I the impact, or sorry, the significance of how far I ended up getting is not lost on me, and I do understand um, and appreciate the fact that I had the opportunity to do something and represent Presec at the highest levels in the world.
Fantastic. We're just like talking about what we can do for the school. And getting funding for some of the projects is a bit of this thing these days here. I mean, if we can put together a team and look at this thing holistically, you think we'll be able to do it? So, like you said, an impact facility that would give the community, the schoolboys, the guys here, develop them, sports like.
I think that would be a great idea. When I spoke to Mr. Butcher, maybe I want to say about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I know he had some architectural drawings and some ideas of some of the things that could be done, but the idea of forming some kind of a committee or a leadership team to try and spearhead this, I think would be a great idea and something that I think most of our most of our idea would want to support
Very well.
because we have a very strong tradition when it comes to sports, and it's something that I think we need to be proud of.
Folks, we've been talking to Professor Andrew Owusu, who has been an inspiration to a lot of young sportsmen in Ghana and particularly Presec. We thank him for flying the Ɔdadeɛ flag high. And before we look at closing this conversation, what are some of the things that you want to talk about? I know you've said several things, but things that are close to your heart that you want to bring out that will give us, yes, that we know that we want to move from where we are to the next level and the next level. I mean, at the last in Paris, you saw how many Nigerian athletes were there, and I mean, we've had Ghana Nigerian games, we've had all sorts of sports before, and they were nowhere close to us. Igbenuki and all those guys, they've been there, but I mean, um, what are we doing? Or what do you see that, we can put together? I know you've had conversations with Mr. Butcher here already, and I'm sure you've had conversations with people in the national front, but, some of the things that you can share with us that.
I think it's really a mindset, and the bigger question is whether as an institution, so Presec, or even at the national level, is whether we want to prioritize sports, and maybe let me get away a little bit from sports, but maybe even combine sports and say sports and physical activity, right? Because on the physical activity side, that's a lifelong engagement in physical activity and an appreciation for physical activity serves as well health wise, right? But on the sports side, I think we need to one decide and have a policy that prioritizes that, right? And then the next question becomes for say Presec is how do we structure it in such a way that our student athletes get the most out of their time in Presec as it relates to academics, and then also on the sports side. And then third, whether we can provide the resources and in this case, when I say resources, I'm talking mostly about facilities, and then also helping our so the sports unit, for example, also gain the necessary skills and knowledge to maintain what I would call a high performance mindset, at that level. Presec needs to be a leader, and we can be a leader also on the sports side, right? It's academics, we are doing great, right? But we also have the people where if we prioritize and think of sports as an important area that we also want to succeed in, I think we will be able to do it. I don't have fully fleshed out plans, but I think it starts with just prioritizing the decision that, hey, this is an important area that we need to start having conversations about. Those conversations then translating into some plans, and then hopefully being able to implement some of them in the near future.
So we have online Zonda, who would want to say a few things. Zonda, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, Koze, I would like to appreciate you. Thank you for standing in for me. You've done a great job. Well done.
Thank you.
To Dr. Andrew Owusu, Charlie, great program.
Johnny, Prof, Engman House, Prof.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to bring down his level.
Bobby Rush will be good enough. or as Francis Bini would say, Kwame.
Yes. Kwame Prof, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the program, and we are grateful for you, showing up. I think you have some great ideas that we can tap into while trying to develop Presec Sports, as well as, the program itself, Ɔdadeɛ Sports Digest. I'm grateful to you all. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Johnny. Well, folks, you've been listening to Professor Andrew Owusu, Bobby Rush. He's taking time off his schedule to share some of his lifetime experiences with us and how he got into athletics in the first place. We thank you all for being with us. Listeners, it's been Heroes of Yesteryear, and we have been talking about this time and recollections of Professor Andrew Owusu as an athlete in Presec, the impact of sports in his life, and how the talent of the young should be harnessed. You'll agree with me that his recollection has indeed been memorable and enjoyable. It's quite clear to me that indeed he was one of the very best during his era in Presec. Prof, we thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you in Ghana and hosting you at the triple jump and long jump pit to see who will go further.
I will bring my spikes and some ice bags.
Thank you very much, and we will get in touch again. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Aye,